Hello, Shawai. This is
Well,
Arafater, and with me is a special guest Akil Khan today. And the secondary special guest we have today is Sam Mills. He's best known in the Indian subcontinent for his production work for the album Real Sugar, which, dude, we're not going to talk about it. Don't worry. I just had to. I
it's
just
beyond the statute of limitations.
um but beyond I mean that still is the big thing in that's my daughter, by the way. So aside from, oh Jesus Christ, sorry, the kitten just clawed down my back. So aside from your production work in Real Sugar, which was a mega hit in the 90s and kind of kickstarted the Baul movement,
Ah, ha, 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 ha,
which
ha.
has happened with regularity since. But aside from that, you're also known in you've also done a lot of cool work with 23 Skidoo. That's the band that you were in the 80s that you told me about. Um, Afrobeat pioneers. To me, I think my favorite
That's
thing
not
that
quite
you
right.
do my favorite thing that you do, aside from Exist in Perfect Beauty, is your work with your wife Susheela Raman, who is one of my favorite musicians. She is such a she is such an incredible force that I can't I've known you, Sam, for 15 years, and I think we're buddies. But even now, even though I've known Susheela for close to 10 years, even now I find it I get nervous, even like leaving a reaction on one of her Facebook posts, because she is
So
such an
do I.
incredible talent, and you guys created one of the most original and breathtakingly beautiful albums of the last decade, which is Ghost Gamelan.
One, only one.
Yeah, yeah, I'll give you a
Well,
couple.
I'll take one. I'll take one. I'll take one. I'll take a victory where I can get it.
I mean, part of this is the fact that instead of doing my research, I just got really wasted.
I
Um,
took the mushrooms and thought about you.
yeah,
I shut
so
my eyes and thought about you.
I
That was
did I
it. You
did
were more
listen
real
to
that
the
way.
I did listen to the whole album last night,
Huh.
and it was it's amazing. I recommend I highly recommend listening to your music on psilocybin.
Which album are you talking about?
Ghost Gamelan.
Oh, the last one. Okay.
Yeah,
Well, I'm
I
glad you
mean,
listened to that one.
yeah, it's I mean, there's other stuff too. I mean, Salt Rain is like, it's all good stuff, but as far as my audience is concerned, which is three 15-year-old Bangladeshi guys waiting for me to slip up and swear, you're basically
But they already switched off now.
yeah, no, I mean,
You can swear. Why don't you swear? You keep them listening, keep them giving.
I think the swears are always it's supposed to be accidentally in Bengali, so it's harder
You
to
can teach me some because I've probably forgotten all the swear words I know. Maybe.
well, that's one of my favorite that's one of my that's my calling card story whenever I tell people about how we met. You were at Anushe and Buno's house playing guitars in 2005 or 6.
Yeah.
And my best friend Imran and I were there. We were in our early 20s, and everybody was, just like, oh my God, the great Sam Mills is here. And we were just sitting around, cracking really shitty jokes. And then at one point you looked at me and you said, you realize I understand everything you're saying.
It was a lie.
I mean, we were
I
just
just
being
wanted to
like,
make you nervous.
yeah, but we were saying just, kill the white devil. That this is for Robert Clive. Just like farting in your general direction, which was another Bangladeshi invention that the British stole from us. Is
Yep.
the
Amongst
weaponized
many other
flatulence.
things.
So
It's
So
where are you?
I guess the first, let's start by explaining where exactly you're situated right now physically. You're in India.
I'm in. I'm trying to move. Not in front of the camera. Now I'm in front of the camera. I'm in Pondicherry. I'm not actually in Pondicherry. I'm in Tamil Nadu, which is and Pondicherry is about 17 kilometers south of where I am now, and I'm basically staying in Chennai at the moment because my wife Susheela's parents both contracted COVID-19, and her father died, and her mother has survived. So we're here to kind of help her out. So that's why we're here. This is like a real gig, you know. This is like one of those things in your life where you think, oh God, I actually have to do something serious rather than being, an idiot and playing, worrying about what chord to play or something, And this is actually a real thing. So until we write a song about it, when it will no longer be real, of course.
Yeah, it's funny how when you I was trying to say something philosophical. I can't fucking do that. I'm sorry. It's gonna be like, you take it out of your heart and you record it, and then it becomes art, and all art is useless, and fuck that shit.
I think the thing with music is, I think that it's not a problem, but I think that the inevitable thing that happens with music is that people play it as a code, and the code becomes very self-referential. But actually what we play music for and need music for is something that's to do with your life, not to do with the music. You go to the music as a kind of therapeutic thing, or as a sort of, I don't know, as a kind of, just a release, a way to have fun, an aesthetic thing, who knows. But I mean, it's as much as it's informed by other stuff, then it becomes interesting. The kind of stuff, when people are endlessly studying like what scale to play and what note to, there's a point to that, but it's, music's supposed to do something psychically. It's supposed to give you a jolt. It's supposed to give you a kind of a lift or whatever. And I think that people are very, very into the idea of music as a kind of code unto itself that you have to kind of master, and that's not to deny the value of practice and mastery, in any way whatsoever. But I think that, what's interesting about rock music and all kind of variants of rock music and stuff like that is that it represents a kind of hybridization, and it represents a mix. It's always a mix. It's never a fixed thing. It's never like, and so the idea that you have to play like some other band or do their imitation of something is really kind of missing the point of what the whole thing is supposed to be, which is a kind of flux, where you have a lot of influences and a lot of, a lot of elements that come in. And I've completely changed topic whilst answering that. And
No. Yeah, I was thinking of a similar thing that I actually would have written to you about on Messenger, but I'll say it here. To your point, like I feel like music is a combination of how we, interact emotionally and intellectually with the universe. But I think the other thing about mastery or practice in general. Give me 1 second, so I can just get this.
Are you talking about masturbation again already?
Well, all music is masturbation because it's a pleasant exercise of muscle memory.
You do it by yourself because no one's watching or listening. I'm sorry, you were going to say about mastery is.
No, I think that I'm sorry. This kitten is way softer than you, sir.
How old is the kitten?
Maybe 12 weeks or something. He was 10 weeks when I got him, and that was 2 weeks ago. It's like how you go to the museum and they're like, yeah, this artifact, this Egyptian bracelet is 3,002 months and 3 weeks old. And how do you know that it's 3,000 years and 2 months and 3 weeks old? Well, it was 3,000 years when we got it 2 months and 3 weeks ago. But I think that when we met, I was 22 or 23 years old, and I was very obsessed with. The what? Sorry.
You were talking about butt plugs when I met you.
Yes, I'm always talking about butt plugs.
Okay.
It's there's a Bengali saying
on the radio. On Radio Chadin or something like that. I don't know what it was. I was like, oh my God, this station's going to come off air soon.
Yeah, it's okay. We don't have enough of a viewership to have to have an issue. But there is a Bengali saying which I think applies equally to butt plugs and music. My grandmother would say this, and I'll translate it for you. This is for the Mukhe ashlo bole dilam, pode ashlo hege dilam, which is it came to my mouth and I said it, and it came to my anus and I shat it out. But I think that I think that music is it's a combination of poetry, for example, which is purely intellectual and emotional, unless your words were jerking off in Tintin Abbey, or sport, which is a physical thing and it's a physical expression of joy, and music is kind of in that middle. And I think that one of the things that you taught me, I mean, you've taught me a bunch of stuff, mostly mostly about bad puns, but the single biggest thing that I always am grateful to you for is you told me to listen to Tago Mago.
Tago Mago.
I'm sorry, I didn't know how to pronounce it.
I don't know, who knows, with Tago Mago, whatever. Tago Mago. Jackie Lieber's right. Really. And
I wrote a song. I wrote a drum performance for him after he passed away. I'll send it to you. It's terrible. It's really not good, but it exists. And I think that that part of that is also why we need music, is that sometimes it's not great, but just the fact that it exists is in itself an expression of freedom and joy.
Yeah, I think at least people are doing so. I mean, if you contemplate somewhere without music, you come up with some kind of, I don't know, kind of fundamentalist, insanity, dictatorial place where everything's censored. I mean, not necessarily you have no music, or you just have state-approved music or something like that, those kind of things. And let's face it, I mean, the sort of the whole Saudi thing, which is probably changing now, but I mean, historically, that whole thing where they reject music.
I've never had a problem with it because Islam allows for drums. So I'm completely happy with going on with just a drum kit and nothing else.
Yes. Okay. Not you. You do not need to indulge in the deceptive wiles of harmony and melody and the sort of seductive, diabolical kind of, mesh of music that will be misleading you into a kind of heathen culture.
That one of the strangest things is that there's been this article going around about how an American pastor argues that syncopation is the work of the devil. And, syncopation. Yeah, and I'm just like, have you not, He
wasn't suffering from syncopation. He obviously not. Because syncopation is black. Isn't it? I mean, when we think of syncopation, I mean, I don't know. I mean, in a way, it's a sort of, it's not in a kind of purely mathematical, technical sense, but obviously the sort of the African influence on the African and European musical mesh that happened in America is kind of like the introduction of a certain kind of syncopation and swing. I don't know, that changed everything. That is the basis of all the stuff that we play, really. I reckon with other kind of flavors, but really it comes that's sort of the center of it. Is it not?
I agree, but I feel like there's also a lot of syncopation, even though it's not necessarily to a beat, in early Christian music, or not early, but Christian music. And I don't mean like praise the Lord, but just generally when we make the move to polyphony, or start playing more complex pieces of music with what we would call today classical instruments, but not necessarily, because I don't know what how I don't know where in art a sackbut exists at this point, except for it's a good word. But
the what was the word?
Oh, sackbut. It's one of the it's a proto, it's like I think it's a horn instrument from it's one of those Renaissance instruments, like the lute. But I mean, you can see John Dolan like dropping panties left and right. That shit was syncopated. That shit was in 6x8. So
but I mean the swing. You know what it's like that you hear music from all over the world, and it's got swung differently and everything like that. But there's definitely a thing in the sort of African influence, Afrocentric or African-based music, where the swing is sort of integral and this sort of polyrhythmic mesh that it's non-linear. What I always find, when you listen to a lot of, say, like you listen to Indian classical music, right? Or South Indian classical music, which I used to hear a lot of here. The counting of the rhythm is incredible. I mean, the mathematical sort of precision and stuff like that, and the virtuosity is really off the scale. At the same time, I always weirdly feel like the rhythms are very linear. That the counting is very linear, and it doesn't have this whole thing of like 2 and 3 diverging, like this, which is what sort of makes your brain move around, sort of, trying to reconcile some, what I mean? The sort of the basis of trance, which I think is what a lot of kind of rock music is kind of comes from that whole, when there's a whole thing with the Haitian drummers, the slave drummers who in Haiti managed to kind of get to New Orleans, and then they started winning all the drum contests that they used to have in the square there, and it was the Haitian guys that were the best because they had the most intense kind of ritual music. They'd kept up all of this really kind of ancient stuff, and really like especially the more complex 6/8 things, and that was really like what led to the sort of grooves that we use in everything, in everything. So I think everything's mixed up, isn't it? From right from the beginning of,
Yeah, and the most fascinating thing about all of this is that, or not the most fascinating thing at all, it's probably the least fascinating thing, but I live in a neighborhood with a lot of Dominican people.
Oh, right, okay.
And their pop music, there's and this is actually a Haitian. Let me ask my daughter. Michael was Haitian, right? Yeah. My daughter's ex-boyfriend was Haitian, and that was the country which is associated with this incredible pop music. It's like, their version of the Beatles or Runa Laila or something. And it's called Kompas.
I was once squashed against Runa Laila at a door in, what's that hall near the University of Dhaka University?
You mean yeah. It's by the art college.
Yes, there was
Giant
a concert
hole
there, and there was a crush, and I was crushed against Runa Laila at the door.
People wait their entire lives for that opportunity.
I'm sorry, it just happened to me. I just happened to be there. And there was also some like 7 foot tall guy from the American Embassy who was like terrified by this mayhem of people queuing to get into this place in a disorderly fashion, Anyway, moving along.
But
your daughter's Haitian connection.
So their pop music is so incredibly complex and beautiful. I'll send you a Kompas music playlist. Like the first time I heard it, I was just blown away because it's incredibly syncopated. It's it's like a million different moving parts. It's almost like a bricklayer going in and creating these interlocking parts, and everything is so tight. But it's not their intellectual music. It's just what everybody happens to listen to. And as a drummer, I think that I was listening to a Bangladeshi band called Prometheus earlier today, because a friend of mine posted about
them. Name for a Bangladeshi band?
Yes, but in Bangladesh it's pronounced Prometheus. But one of the things I realized is that in the late 80s, early 90s, I have a theory that Bangladesh had like a 6-7 year period of incredible fecundity in rock music, and that was really, in my opinion, the best period. It starts with Feedback's Ullash and stops with LRB's Koshto, if you want to, or Feelings is Nogorbaul, if you want to put specific dates to that. But we had pop music that was so much more complex. Like, I think the songs, the specific song I was listening to, and I'll send it to you, it's wonderfully cheesy. It sounds like like early 80s Trevor Rabin, or not Trevor Rabin, Trevor Horn, the producer, like the Buggles and stuff. It sounds like that, but the lyrics are like, I took, like, we're going to take this martyr's blood and get rid of, the dictator. It's Ershad, who used to be married to my aunt, and they're both dead now. So maybe they're finally together again. But that's what music was. It was, this brave kind of, fuck you. And people didn't necessarily worry as much about technical skill or, theoretical perfection. When we met, I was obsessed with, learning to play more notes, playing in odd time signatures, and, the kind of stuff that people at a certain part of their journey are obsessed with. And
geek phase.
Yeah. And
I think it's always there, right? I think it's always there, actually. I think it's always, that's really, it's really interesting always to go into that. But yeah, it doesn't mean you're going to write anything good with it, of course.
Yeah, I agree, which is, it reminds me of a joke about technical mastery. It's from a comic called Achewood, where they had a picture of Robert Fripp, and the caption was, whenever Robert Fripp gets his picture taken, he always has to make the most difficult chord on the guitar. Which is not kind to him, because he is more than that. But I think you introduced me to the idea of joyful chaos, and how music is not necessarily about controlling every variable, but letting go and entering into what an asshole would call a flow state. It's one of those buzzwords that's been going around now, but it really.
Where you are in America, you mean a slow state? I was thinking slow. Yeah, okay, an intuitive, open, in the zone state.
Yeah, mean? Like writing your name in the water. And
let me ask you a question, though.
Yes,
okay,
sir.
So what you're saying is so we met in 2005.
Yeah.
This millennium, right? And you said that, I have no recollection of any of this stuff. I think that what you're describing is a sort of result of having what to me would probably be a normal conversation with people who are into music. I do remember coming to Bangladesh because it was the first time I've been after a long time, and we all met with you, and you were there, and Anushi's place, right?
Yep.
And my question is, okay, what this idea of being like joyful and chaotic on the top, why would that be a news to you there? It's something I wonder about, because it's a bit like, why would that be a sort of like a new information? Because to me, that's like, that was the whole point of like music. I mean, all the music we did was sitting around playing hippie jamming and all this stuff, and I know there must be plenty of that going on, and there always wasn't.
I came from, and I think that
Why to you would that be news? I'm taking you you're in Dhaka, right? And
Yeah.
this some guy, this Shada Chamra guy, turns up and starts going blah 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 blah, talking some
You
bullshit.
called me Motka, which was amazing.
I called you what? Burta.
Motka. You
Burta.
called me Fatso. It was
Really?
I don't know if
really?
you did or not, but in my mind I have this wonderful memory of like, you looking at me with a gimlet eye and a wagging finger being like, Motka. It's probably entirely fictional.
Of my Bangla, really. So yeah, probably, possibly. Morti, Mota.
Yeah, Mota, and Motka is fat person.
Boring, yeah, I know. Anyway, we don't do that kind of abuse nowadays because it's objectifying in all the wrong ways.
But I think that the reason, why, and those conversations were life-changing for me, not least because you told me to listen to Can, which, it's one of those things where, you just drop a breadcrumb, but that breadcrumb changes somebody's life because it happens to fall, in the right time.
Shrapnel, they work their way through the system, but reach your brain.
But I also think that, and I'd like to get your opinion on that as somebody who is an outsider to Bangladesh, but also has insider knowledge in a way that most white people who would be more sanitized, you're not very sanitized. Because we
you can smell it off of the internet.
But I think that the reason why we had more of a rebellious streak in Bangladeshi rock music, and it was more about emotional honesty and protest in really the golden period of Bangladeshi rock music, which is, when there was this decade when, every week.
Are you going to write a book about it or something? Are you not going to unburden yourself with this thing into it? Because it seems to be like a major topic, that you have to.
It's something that
you sort of.
It's
perhaps you should write about it. I know it would probably make you very unpopular, if you're not already, and because you have to pass judgment on people that you don't.
Yeah, it's not going to be a good consensus because I think that rock music in Bangladesh went from being a middle class endeavor to there was a bigger barrier to entry, and it turned out that it just so happened, I don't know how, but we went from having middle class concerns to aping whatever was the current music. And I think that part of that is, when all music is translating your influences into the language that you understand. And, with Bangladesh, with our relationship with Western media, which, is the ultimate colonization at this point, more than America's 7,000 military bases. I think, the Avengers movies are probably a better tool of that. But we went from wanting to be like, maybe, just to throw a name out there, not, I'm not married to this, but we went from being, wanting to be like Bob Dylan, whose protest songs were pretty fucking simple. It's like, yeah, I'm going to put this gun down. I want to be your friend. All I really want to do is be your friend. Or I think it goes, all I really want to do is maybe be friends with you. And
I think he's a bit of a sort of bit more of a bag of contradictions, isn't he? He's not actually friendly. He's kind of he's quite sort of what's the word? Not misanthropic, but he's a sort of secret curmudgeon, or not a secret curmudgeon. He's
there's nothing secret about that.
He's very prickly character, obviously.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, my friend wrote a book about him. My friend wrote a book about him that was instrumental in him getting his Nobel Prize.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's called Dylan's Visions of Sin. It's really good. It's by a guy called Christopher Ricks. If you want to read a literary, like solid literary criticism, that's just a close reading of Dylan as one would do with like Milton or Keats, that's a book that exists. Right. That was one of the earlier ones of its kind where he took pop music and treated it like quote unquote literature. But I think that when we went from having very simple political messages like war is bad, to stuff that's more complex and slightly harder to unpack, like Nirvana or Guns N' Roses, where they're also singing about human concerns, but they're doing so. And I specifically mention these bands because Bangladesh always has a lag time of 10 to 15 years. But even I'm sorry, that's Moshami. Ammo!
All right. Moshami!
Hi, Moshami! Ammo! Sorry about that.
It's all right.
So
bring her in.
No, she's inside. She's barking at the mailman. All she does is, she's been on edge because the kitten doesn't like her.
She's worried about whether Trump's going to actually stay in power.
Wait, what did you say?
She's always on edge. She's just an asshole. The kitten is not the reason.
My daughter says that Moshami's an asshole.
That's not very nice. Pondicherry.
So, but my point was that I think when the messaging of rock music became more codified, I think that's when there was a translation loss, and Bangladeshi musicians went from singing about the blood of tyrants, or there's one of my favorite songs lyrically is about a guy who's a retired father. It's by Ayub Bachchu. It's just a great song. It's about an old man who's on a fixed income. He lives in a house, he gets up in the morning, and that's all he does.
Did he retire from? He retired from what? From being a father?
No, he's just an old man who lives. It's just one of those beautiful sketches of a dude who is old and he's at the end of his life and he's just kind of chilling. Versus, I don't see anybody writing music like that in Bangladesh, and I have no idea where my point was going, Sam. I'm so sorry.
I was asking you originally why you felt that if we had a meeting in 2005 and I was going blah, blah, blah and talking some kind of bullshit, whatever, that it made an impression on you because it was something that sort of information wasn't available.
It was not available at all.
As a sort of part of the intelligent, switched on Anglophone intelligentsia into music and all that stuff. And, as we know that a lot of people who play music have that kind of, have some of that sort of privileged background. And yet, this thing that are common sense about the whole idea of, I suppose it's like the whole post-punk idea of music being a bit more sort of DIY. It's about certain authentic emotion, like you're allowed to try and experiment, even though, and people can say it's rubbish, but you have a voice, you're entitled to do things, because I think that what happened from my perspective, coming from that sort of background of music where it wasn't, it wasn't classic rock, you know what I mean? Like when I came into music in my late teens, and that sort of important moment of your life when the things that were really sort of like my friends and I were listening to were more to do with like we were getting into kind of weird records from all over the place, and some kind of rock music, but like, you know, things like This Heat and Can and you know, experimental stuff, because the idea was that rock was actually dead. Like, we pronounced it dead. Like, Joy Division were just about the last rock band, you know, and even they were sort of like, somehow they managed to make this incredible music with very limited technical means as players, but the music has a real power. It still sounds great, you know. So, but like after that, like the idea of playing rock was like finished, and it was really weird because when you saw like grunge coming in, it was a bit like, okay, it's coming back, but you know, that was it was retro, and Nirvana was retro in a way. I think
very much, yeah.
I don't think it's that unfair to say, you know. So I think they were totally admitting it themselves. So
no, they were very. I mean, they never hit it, and I think that, you know, Kurt Cobain was a really good soul songwriter. Like, you can take, if you strip away the heavy drums and the distortion and stuff, you're left with solid songs, which is, you know, the golden standard, which is why there's so many interpretations of, like, there's so many cover albums for the Beatles and Black Sabbath. It's because at the end of the day, it's like, na 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 na.
You can play it on a ukulele and it works.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I mean, it was, you know, a song is a song. A song is always a good song. No, it doesn't matter what format it's done in, but this whole idiom of like rock music. So when you talk about the 90s and this sort of, to me, it was like we were like, rock was like dead already, you know. It was like, why would you still be, you know? And then, you know, there was a whole point when this kind of acid house was really popular, when like sales of guitars had just sort of like fallen through the floor. And then, you know, then there was this big comeback of like guitar music, you know, and all that stuff. Speaking as a guitarist, you know, so I don't mind, you know, I don't wish to be obsolete, you know, but you know, the sort of, it's amazing how that sort of was thought to have passed, and then you get, you know, what this sort of transition to the whole, you know, I don't know, postmodernist kind of thing where everything's recycled endlessly, and you know, you just have bits and pieces of things strung together. So let's have a bit of, you know, we listen to all this stuff, you know, a bit of soul, a bit of heavy metal, but you know, if you're eclectic in your musical taste, which I think any sensible person is, then, you know, there's all these kind of musics you end up listening to, and if you're a player, you kind of recycle them, and it's like all the historical period is jumbled. But there was still a kind of sense of trajectory from like 19, you know, perhaps this false history from you know, that rock and roll kind of came in the 1950s, and that was a sort of breakthrough thing, of course, which was just an appropriation of like some black music that was, you know, the rhythm and blues stuff. But I mean, okay, so then this rock music starts, and then it's really weird. You get into the sort of all these Pink Floyd type bands, which again was sort of seen to be like, from the perspective of 1982, Dark Side of the Moon was like ancient. It was like 1973. It was like ancient history of like hippies, you know. And this had been sort of not. This was there because obviously you know, everyone knew that those people, they could do amazing things, and they sneakingly liked them anyway, and everybody liked everything really, but they were a bit like, oh no, I only listen to, you know, something like Throbbing Gristle or something, you know, something painful, you know. And you know, I think there was a passage, you know, there was a moment in time when everything became a bit more like, we're going, you know, we were listening. I think there were certain things like Can that seemed important because those people had sort of just gone to a sort of rhythmic bass, and they'd done something that was sort of not culturally limited in a way. I mean, I think they were sort of creating some utopian thing in Germany. They were a hippie commune, and they all lived in this place, and they all played together, and that they created a certain kind of music that wasn't like just this Anglo-Saxon thing, you know, which or this American thing that was being exported. It still had all of that in it, but it was sort of reformulated and kind of mixed with avant-garde stuff, and kind of had that eclecticism that was open. And then you heard a lot of sort of African influences and stuff like that in it, and it was really clear. You could really sort of feel that the space was there for that, and I think that the whole attitude that came into the post-punk period, where even people like John Lydon, who was like the Johnny Rotten, the Sex Pistols, was always like, he did this radio program in London in like 1978, and he came on and everyone thought he'd be playing like, I don't know, like the Ramones and the New York Dolls, and everything else was not allowed, But actually, he came in, he played Can, he played, I don't know, he played all sorts of things, a lot of reggae stuff, a lot of, and that's the other thing
reggae was punk as fuck. It's,
yeah, so, it was a total sort of cultural sort of presence from the late 70s in the UK, from the mid to the late 70s. This reggae thing was coming up, Big Youth. I remember, my brother would sort of be getting stoned in the room next door to mine, listening to Big Youth and, Bob Marley and U-Roy and all these kind of, that sort of toasting stuff and, dub. And that really was like a huge kind of reprogramming for a lot of people. When you hear it, then you go like, hang on, how come the beat's in the other place? And then somebody passes you something to smoke and you suddenly zone into it and go like, like a sort of revelation. But I think that this whole thing, everything got sort of mixed together. And I think that the sort of the post-punk aesthetic was like, had this thing where you were allowed to try stuff. And, so I think that when I went to Bangladesh, when I was living in Dhaka, for a while, but I would kind of occasionally go over and go to West Bengal as well, get on a B-man flight, like 20 minutes or whatever it was, and if it arrived, and I met Paban, the singer, Paban Das Baul, and he was friends of friends and whatever. But this whole sort of thing of like, doing something it was like, well, hey, we can try it. It wasn't like, oh my God, I've got to go and sort of study this thing for like 15 years before I can play a note and whatever. And, it was more like, we can try it. It's like individual to individuals, person to person, So the whole thing with all these kind of cultural mixes you get in music is sometimes there's this sense of like the code, we're always talking about the code, but I think of it as a person, everyone does it in their own way. You have your own personal version of things. So when you meet another musician, it's a person to person encounter and there's no rules.
And when you play, I think you can never truly escape the person you are when you play. Like that's what translates.
No, sadly, no, you can't, you can't, and you can't fool yourself either. You know what I mean? You can, but you occasionally can have a good day. You can go like, that happened. Wow. So every so often something just sort of manifests, which is like really good, and then a lot of the time it's just, okay, just churn. But, I really, it's always an interesting thing because you come up against this whole sort of, the idea of cultural trespass and the idea of, you can't do this, you don't own that, this belongs to somebody else, it's quite an interesting thing because I get letters, I still get messages the whole time about Real Sugar, for example, which is a bit like, it's great, except that, we made it 20 years ago in like the bedroom I was living in London, mostly on Cubase, kind of putting like, 1/10 of a second samples together and then making bits and then a bit of that. And, it was all sort of really just amateur, I suppose. But that's nice, I suppose that's nice. It's really weird because now I listen to it and think, why did we do that? But it kind of has a charm that carries on. And it's like 20, I think we did a 20th anniversary gig in Jaipur, not somewhere where there's a lot of Bengali people listen to it, but anyway, Paban and I did a gig together at the Jaipur Literary Festival to celebrate the 20th anniversary of that, and we played all the songs and all that stuff, and it was nice, it was really nice. It's quite interesting because I think that with the Baul thing, it was a little bit there's an affinity between the sort of Baul thing and like being a bit easygoing about your concepts of structures and what's proper to do, and you just, and although of course there's a lot of rules associated with all those worlds as well. But I mean, compared to when I started playing with Susheela, who I met because she heard Real Sugar. So my real sort of like reward for doing that. Not that we ever got a penny from all the copies that were sold in Bangladesh, and more particularly Paban never got a penny for it either. Although
that's par for course.
But it's sad, really. I mean, considering how much pleasure it gave people, Anyway, Bangladesh was a bit ahead on the old sort of music piracy thing, in the mid 90s, it was still a dream, whatever. What was the site that everybody used to use? I've forgotten.
Napster,
yes. Napster was still a sort of was still a nascent thing then. But anyway,
it was hard to get new music back then. There was 3 stores, and back then it was just something that was. You never questioned it. You never thought about why it was like that. But there were essentially 3 stores on Elephant Road, if you remember Elephant Road.
I remember.
The 3 stores were Rainbow, Shurosri, and Rhythm. And
Okay.
Rainbow had all the newest hard rock releases on CD, and Shurosri had a bunch of old LPs from the 80s, and then Rhythm was the weird freak show where they just had all this, strange jazz and funk and blues, which in Bangladesh in the 90s was just insane. And the guy who owned Rhythm, his younger brother, has become, one of the most important historians of Bangladeshi music. He's written these books, and they're really great. His name is Milu Aman. But back then, the only way you could get certain music is you would go to one of these 3, not 4 stores with a blank cassette, and they would record the music, for you, and you would come back 3 or 4 days later. And the way you would discuss, so you would go to get like the new Iron Maiden album or the new Dio album, and that was the only acceptable music. And the way you would discover new music is if you bought a 90-minute cassette and you had a 60-minute album, or 2 45-minute albums. If there was any space, they would put in new songs in there, and that was the only way. That was our osmosis. We didn't have cable television until later on. And even today, with access to YouTube and all of this, I think that we rely greatly on because I think Bangladeshi culture is very we tend to stick together. We're very cohesive, and we don't necessarily reward iconoclasts, is the most polite way of saying it. So much of music discovery is still happening just through word of mouth. And unfortunately, that's what leads us to the lag time. Because I used to wonder, back then you had extremely limited resources, but now everybody has the same resource, which is everything ever made. And yet we tend to stick to existing extant musical tropes. And the reason why is because you listen to what your older brother was listening to, and your older brother still listened to
what you got a dopamine hit from, and when you were the age 17, you get stuck with. Kind of, there is that thing, isn't it? Your own sacred music is always the music that was your. So I think music, somebody once asked me, they said, what is music? And my answer was, it was my aunt actually. She said, Sam, what's music? And I said, I think the music is the sound of a threshold being crossed. It's a sort of, music is because if you think in terms of rituals, the sort of theatrical thing. You know, when you have a change of pace, when you have a moment where there's a sort of, yes, a deepening or actually a kind of transition from one phase of a ritual to another, the music is there. It's always the bridge. You know what I mean? It's like it's the sort of the non-verbal kind of language of hubbub that just carries you through. And then if you think of this whole idea of like mystics and mystical states, this whole idea that you sort of you pass one threshold of consciousness into another, and that's the sort of idea of music. You know, you hear like the music of the spheres or whatever it is. You know, this sort of esoteric thing. But I mean, music is associated with a threshold. It's a liminal thing, you know, you could say. But it's you know, it's always that's what, if you think about it, it's sort of like trying to induct things. So I think people in their own lives, when they're in the process of becoming an adult, then music becomes this thing that's like incredibly important. Unfortunately for you and me, Arafat, what happened was that we probably got stuck. You know, that moment of transition, we thought, okay, you know, and everyone's going, okay, we've moved through this corridor and we're now going to be grown-ups. We're like going, no, let's stay in the corridor because it sounds great. Have you heard the echo in here? You know, do you know what I mean? And it's a bit like, okay, so some idiots get caught up in music forever, you know, which is, music is probably a means to an end, you know, and as we're like, no, you know, the means is everything, you know. Anyway, I mean, that was extremely pertinent to what you were saying before, and I have no recollection of it. So we can just move on, shouldn't we?
I mean, that is
transition. You know, we transition. We have some music. You know, perhaps you can make some there. You know.
No, and that's. I think that's very accurate. I think you know, one of my favorite musicians and drummers, who's the only drummer I know of who got a writing credit for not playing in a song.
I know the story. Yes. I know you wrote Crimson, right?
Yep, Bill Bruford. He talks about music or creativity as this entity that exists when.
Sorry, I spoiled the story. You should tell the story. The guy was sitting in on a session they were recording, and when it came to the take, he actually didn't play, which was a fantastic contribution to the music, you know, to sort of be silent. And he realized it's going to be amazing. It doesn't need the drums, and he stopped playing. And that was his part, you know, which was like very wise. And that was acknowledged by the other musicians who gave him a writing credit for, you know, for doing what every drummer should do, which is like, shut the fuck up.
Yeah, I think the liner notes said he got a credit for tasteful restraint, but that also, as a drummer, I have found it incredibly liberating to know that I will never be a great drummer
because you will never shut up, so you will never get that credit. Is that what you're saying?
No, I just think that I'll never be a great drummer, and I think that when I have that acknowledgement, that when I accept that I'll never be great, that opens me up to listen more and to play for my joy and not necessarily worry about how many notes I can fit into this fill, which is not a measure of greatness, but it was for the longest time. I think that I forgot who it was. Might have been one of like the Chets, like Baker or Atkins, said that it takes a really good drummer to be better than no drummer. And I think that's where music exists. And it goes back to the point that we were talking about when we said that you can't escape the person that you are. And, you know, that is that conflict. That is where music exists. And that is where, you know, I think I always, you know, I was a student of English when I was in university before I was a dropout. And I think I always think of, I think of Stuart Copeland and John Keats in in kind of the same breath, because they're both music that speaks to my heart. And I think that poetry is often solipsistic, in that you can enter that universe by yourself, and you record your experience of that universe by yourself, and then once it's a complete thing, you kind of share it with the world. But in music,
social.
you have to, I mean, not necessarily, I guess there's
It's
famous
social, or it's nothing,
yeah
right?
And there will be, there are lone geniuses like Mike Oldfield or Fuad al-Muqtadir, but
Prince.
but even then, you're still, it's music is like the bridge between art and sport, and this is
You're repeating yourself. You said that earlier.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And it's maybe by distinguishing between art and sport as different things, maybe I'm being disingenuous, because who are we to say that you do this with your mind and you do this with your body? But there is so much art to sport, and there's so much sport to art. Aha.
I think you've answered yourself there, haven't you? I mean, music and art, art and sport, they're obviously all kind of, there is no dividing line between any of these things. They're just categories of kind of, I mean, obviously some people, the best musicians have like really good reflexes, and the drummers especially, some of the best drummers I know, they're kind of sporty and lean, and they have this sort of physical, I don't know, get up, what's the word? I don't know, they have this kind of attitude, Like Tony Allen was a bit like that. It was very wiry, kind of, but he didn't look like anything. He would just sit there and be like, appear to be not moving, and then doing
very angular. But he had I think Tony Allen, who's also a drummer who I know thanks to you.
That's somebody worth getting to know about, isn't it?
Oh my God, he's so good.
Quite a presence, We were very lucky to play with him. We did stuff with an album with him, and there's a couple of other, bit more than an album actually. He turned up. We thought we would do a couple of tracks, and he just ended up playing on everything, But he was an amazing guy. He was a bit fond of a drink, We did this record. We made a record. Susheela's second album was called Love Trap, and it was about 2002. We'd had a really successful album, so it was like, second album. Okay, let's do it. Like, let's go to this recording studio in Spain. It was actually in Andalusia, and Tony Allen came down, and a bunch of other people came down, and he was great. Before 4 p.m. I shouldn't say the disrespect, because he was a fantastic person, and really very, we kind of had a moment with him. And he goes to go and see him in Paris and all that stuff. And he goes, there is no end to my drumming. And he was saying, and it was like, when he said it, I had this really weird vision of this very long, kind of endless sort of, I don't know, kind of row of trees or something like that, just kind of going off forever, because of that infinite fractal kind of thing here. He's very interesting, because he'd play and you'd never hear this, that jazz thing or thing, the snare never stays, it's never exactly the same, two consequent bars, but he's just playing a really steady groove, really kind of, but you also, when somebody's that amazing, you get used to them being around. So it's like Tony Allen. Okay, Tony Allen, I don't know if everybody knows anybody. I probably no one listens to this. It's just you and me, But if there's anybody, Tony Allen was the drummer for Fela Kuti, who was one of the great musicians of our era. And they kind of created this sort of hybrid African funk thing that I think there was a lot of James Brown in it. And then I think there was one point which James Brown heard them and there was a lot of overlap. But I mean, when they all went to that thing, when Foreman and Ali boxed in the Congo, I think that fella was there, and I think James Brown was there as well. So they all checked each other out, apparently, which is a kind of interesting thing. I don't know, anyway. It's a sort of Foreman versus Ali kind of battle on the side, isn't it? Fella versus James Brown,
One of the things I think
a film coming on.
I think about this often is like the two most intractable people in music, Ginger Baker and Fela Kuti, hanging out. And just, can you imagine just like the monumental assholes they were?
The egos of yeah. Yeah, he was very he was a curmudgeon, wasn't he, Ginger Baker? That was for sure. Kind of, but fella, yeah, it's a little bit before. I saw him play in London actually in about 1982, but that was with the Egypt 80, not the Africa 70, which is the classic lineup. And all I remember, he came on. I don't know if this will be funny to you. You may or may not get this joke because it's a 1980s joke, but basically, this is about 1983 or something like that. And he comes on stage and they play for half an hour of doing this sort of like, what you do, what rock bands do at the end of a song when they haven't worked out the ending, when they go,
yeah, the trash can ending, yeah.
But yeah, basically, it went on for about 20 minutes waiting for fella, and then finally he came on stage, and we were, it was really, this is the Brixton Academy in London, and he came up with his arms raised, like this, with a white stripe painted across his face, like here. He said, "I am adamant," which we all went, ha ha, because I'm adamant. Anyway, who used to do that? It was a pop star did that. Anyway.
Oh no, I love Adam and the Ants.
Sorry, that was a very unfunny story. But anyway, he was. It wasn't nearly as good as it was. I felt like I missed the classic period, But Tony Allen was really an amazing guy. He lived in Paris, and he was just. I think that when we met, his career hadn't sort of taken back off again. So he was, and we, when I met Paban introduced me to a lot of African musicians in Paris, because Paban Das Baul lived in Paris with his wife, Mimna Hussein. And they have this sort of Bauli kind of presence, lifestyle, whatever, and but Paban was really like a lot of the African. There's this whole obviously incredible African music scene in Paris from the 80s with all these guys coming over like Salif Keita and the musicians with them, and and they were all very kind of. The Lodestone was actually the Joe Zawinul as well. The guy from Weather Report came and played there, and then he was working with African musicians. So there was a lot of musical excitement about. Not only these sort of African guys playing jazz, and there's this kind of virtuosity and these incredible Cameroonian bass players coming through and all, and there was a guy called Sheikh Tidiane Seck, who is a keyboard player. He's a Malian guy who's a sort of godfather of a lot of musicians there. He's a kind of godfather figure, and Paban was friends with him, and so we met a lot of African musicians through him, and we actually started playing together with this group Tama. And it was this incredible group with this Malian guy who played the kora and the ngoni, and Paban was singing, and they had an amazing duo, which is after Real Sugar, and this is what Paban was kind of doing next, but they sort of fell out, and we were all started playing together, playing the Real Sugar repertoire, and then me and Paban just kind of completely fell out over some stupid thing and didn't talk for about 6 or 7 years. And but I ended up playing with, I met all these African guys, and going to France and was a lot. And then with Susheela, we got into that as well. So this whole sort of interesting mix happened there. That was a real big thing. And I had a band for a while with these. This guy from Mali and another guy from Guinea-Bissau who was a percussionist called Januno.
What was the band called?
The band was called Tama, Tama, which is the name
like
of
the
it.
drums.
Which it means ball or something in Japanese, a sphere, I think, but it actually means in Bengali, sorry, in Bambara, in West African language, it means to walk, to journey. Anyway, we had this band called Tama, and we did a couple of albums for Real World. And I was completely out of my depth. And I got my ass kicked really badly, which was really good for me because I kind of learned to play a lot better. And I still don't play well, but, I kind of it was a discipline, Are you breaking up? You're breaking up a little bit at this end.
Sorry, my daughter is leaving. She's not my biological daughter, by the way. I just like to call her my daughter because she's young, and it's funny because I think that by calling her my daughter, I can tell her, do this, do that, till they take out the recycling.
And it takes out the risk of rejection as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reason why I started calling her my daughter is because her mother is my age, in her late 30s.
You're getting to that age. You're getting to that age, yeah. When somebody calls you uncle, and you go like, "Wait a minute," I'm waiting to be called grandfather or something now,
But her mother is incredibly attractive, so I wanted to reverse it. I'm like, if I call you my daughter, perhaps
you could have.
Okay,
It implies a history with her mother that you never were able to enjoy.
And you use that as a ticket to get with other women. That's one of the things that happened to me is that I I was married very briefly to a woman who was stunning, and while the marriage itself was a bad idea, I will always be able to use that as a calling card when meeting new women. Just be like, yo, I was married to this babe. So clearly, you beautiful women have to have something in common. It's like entry to that club. Like once you fit inside that club, you can.
It was a very short marriage.
3 months. I think when we finally had sex, she realized it wasn't meant to be.
It wasn't all it was cracked up to be.
No, it was
oh, come on, that's not really.
Oh no. We had sex well before 3 months.
There's always butt plugs.
That is I'm sorry. I'm getting I received something like 15 text messages in the last 5 minutes telling me that I've gotten kicked out of one of the bands that I play for because I didn't go to rehearsal yesterday. So
I've been kicked out of band. It's all right. It's good.
Yeah, it's
very formative.
It's not. It's it's a badge of pride because we had there was no reason to do rehearsal. It wasn't scheduled, or I think it was scheduled. I'm way I'm changing the story here to suit my own needs. What happened was I said that I couldn't go because my daughter, which this part is true, worked 28 days straight in a COVID lab so that she could visit me for my birthday, which is 2 days hence. I'll be 39. So I was like, if somebody, worked 28 days straight to visit me, I would rather spend time with her than, play a bunch of Grateful Dead covers at, which we've played for the last few years, and there's nothing.
You are a sentimental fool. The monster of music has not sort of you've not allowed it to destroy your social life.
If there was a concert, I would have been there. It just wasn't. It was just one of those things. It's you don't think it's a big deal, but but then
Are you feeling rejected?
A little bit, but I think I feel like I have to put out this fire because the other guy, like my main person in that band is one of my best friends, who I think is emotionally broken up over it because it's like you
and him can have a side project.
Oh no, we play in other bands too. It's just
very how many bands are you in? Isn't the whole point of being a band that how many gangs can anybody be in?
I'm in 2 bands. One of them is I was in 2 bands. One of them was a church where we would play, concerts, and we played socially distanced concerts. And the other one is, my Bangladeshi thing with Imran, whom you met in 2005. But I think that I think I should go and handle Jason Camerata being, feeling guilty because, like it happened so that we have
They'll come crawling back. Don't worry.
Oh, I'm not worried. This makes no difference in my to my life. It's just that Jason happens to be he's the worst kind of friend to have because he's a good human, like he's a good person, and he can't have they're the most difficult people to deal with because he approaches everything with love and honesty and goodness. I'm just like, fuck this shit. It's just so we had our band leader send Jason a text message being like, I want Arafat's drums out of the fucking church right now. So I have to, handle all of that.
Have you ever just said you're out of the band? You say, yeah, try and sort of, go on then. Move me.
So I think I have to go and call him back and calm him down and talk him off the ledge.
You're saying this is the end of the interview. I have a fish waiting for me.
What kind of fish?
I'm not sure. It's a grilled fish on the menu here. I'm not sure. I shall find out. It's probably I don't know what they have here. Pomfret or something. I don't know.
Oh,
from the Bay of Bengal.
Chanda mach.
No.
Pomfret. That's Bengali is chanda, and mach is fish.
Yes.
That is one of the greatest fishes you could have. So know about hilsa, about ilish. Oh, that's an incredible fish. You know about ilish much, right? You've had ilish.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And so pomfret and ilish or hilsa, those are the two. They're the greatest fishes. Although, the other thing I would, I'm sure you know this, but Chennai has some of the greatest desserts in the world. People don't think about desserts when they think about Chennai, but they have because it's mostly just vegetarian food. But
the Brahmins.
But
this is my wife's household. It's very Brahminical. There's no meat, no fish, no eggs. So we've come away for a couple of days. So I'm ordering fish, chicken, eggs, loading up on all this stuff.
The desserts are almost a slap in the face to that austerity because when I was in Chennai, I was dying of really bad lung problems, and I had malaria and typhoid. And instead of taking me to a hospital, my mother thought that it was, more expedient for me to go to an Ayurvedic clinic. And that's why I was in Chennai. And the desserts there, it's all stores owned and run by Muslims. So it's almost like, they're repudiating the vegetarianism by making these desserts so incredibly rich. I think it's always butter and sugar, and then they'll sprinkle some saffron in, but it's essentially just everything is nothing but, ghee and sugar. It's really incredible.
Maybe a cashew nut or something if you're lucky.
Yeah. By the way, even better, we just, as we were speaking, I got, the series of text messages saying that I'd gotten kicked out of the band. And I just now got a notification that CNN projects, finally, we are officially acknowledging that, instead of the incompetent asshole, we're getting, the incompetent other guy who's slightly less of an asshole.
Oh, tell me.
They just Joe Biden just got announced he's going to be 46th president. I think they're finally, they're finally calling it.
He got to 270.
I think he was going to get to 270. Anyway,
has Trump conceded though?
Oh, motherfucker, 284. And he's still going to get Georgia and Nevada. Oh.
Yes.
Glorious fucking day. And see, we are swearing. Oh my God.
Woo! Not Trump. Anything but Trump.
From Samuel Mills to Uncle Sam.
Half of America still voted for Trump though. Fucking hell. What a
you don't
have to answer. It's a rhetorical question. It's a rabbit hole.
I used to think so. And I will shut up after this because I really do have to, talk to this guy. I used to think, I live in Boston and I moved here when I was 18 and I was in English, I was in the English department at Boston University. And until maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I was the only non-white person, in my group of friends. All my friends were white. And that's because Boston essentially is a very homogenous city. And because it's one of those weird places where I think there is a lot of racism, but we don't call it that. We codify it. We'll have a Black Lives Matter sign in a window where nobody who's Black would ever, live in that neighborhood. So because I was hanging out with basically, rich kids at Boston University, and I was the only non-white person, I was enough of a novelty that I personally never experienced hostile racism. I experienced stuff like, people making a big deal of like, oh my God, Arafat's coming into the room, like, move all the bacon out of here because we don't want to offend him, which is, benign. But I never understood why people talked about racism until, Trump did, which I will always consider a great gift, is he really uncovered that rock. He lifted the rock and we saw that shit. But I also sincerely believe that while America is fundamentally racist, it's a country built on racist traditions. I do think that more than racist, what America is we are more sexist than racist. And I think that Trump appeals to the, vileness inside of us, or, to the 50% or, like 40%, whatever percentage of American yokels who voted for him. But they're not even yokels, they're just people who think that, women and Blacks are getting too uppity. And I think that my personal belief is that, Trump really just gave you permission to be, and this is not a unique belief. It's just that we are really sexist as a nation. And more so than, in like, even though the Bangladeshi women heads of state have all, kind of taken their mandate from, their ex-husband or their fathers who were in positions of power. But still in Bangladesh, we have women leaders. But I think that, and it's, because Bangladesh is more classist than sexist. So, but I think in America, it's the fundamental driving force of the American people is sexism.
Oh, really?
And racism, and Trump is kind of the.
I think it's racist. I think I mean the perception you got. I mean, even UK is racist as well. It isn't everywhere's racist. India's racist. My God.
Oh my God, yeah.
There's a particular kind of racist thing in America where you go which was sort of, we could see a cultural difference looking from Europe, America going so segregated, and so it's such a statement if a black person and white person are kind of going out together. You know what I mean? It's
and I think
the self-consciousness about identity in America is so strong. It's like the self is always this big project, so the kind of identity is a big project. No,
and I think on a even simpler thing is that Europe was kind of, England was kind of already formed when other races started coming into England en masse, which is what, the 17th or 18th century. But America was created with that blueprint so they could codify it into the language of the cities and the geography even. So when you have the opportunity to create a country from the ground up, and you already have extant within that country a race that you find it beneficial to subjugate, then you build that subjugation into the fabric of the entire country. And that's something that's not going to change in the next 4 years, but at least we've acknowledged it.
Yourself, then how do you feel like very American?
I feel incredibly American.
Is there such a thing as feeling American?
I feel more American than anything else at this point in my life, because when I think of Bangladesh, I think of, as with any immigrant, when I left Bangladesh, I left with, this snow globe, this picture perfect Bangladesh in my head. But that country does not exist anymore. The Bangladesh that I see is a Bangladesh that exists in my mind, and Bangladesh has moved on, and so have I. So when I go to Bangladesh, it's how I feel when I go to Bangladesh is actually how I felt when I so my ex-wife and I went for a walk for the first time since she left. We've been trying to be civil to each other, and we walked for hours in these woods that are close to me. There's this arboretum. It's just it's kind of half woods, half gardens, and it's beautiful. And while I was walking with her, it was here's something that just a short time ago meant everything to me, but now it's completely different, even though it's exactly the same, because we all evolve. And Bangladesh, to me, is, when I think about Bangladesh, I think about sitting on the sidewalk in Dhanmondi drinking tea. But nobody does that anymore, and all of the things that I remember about Bangladesh has changed beyond recognition. So I
once went trying to look for the place that I used to live. It was in Green Road. I lived in
you lived off of the road. You showed me actually the exact road in which you lived, which is, if you go down Green Road from, if you go down from Dhanmondi or Kolabagan towards Pantopot, there's a street that goes off to the right into Kathalbagan, and that's where your apartment was. Because I remember you showing me that street, because one of my favorite lyricists in Bangladesh, this amazing guy called Latiful Islam Shibli, he used to live, I think, 3 houses down from you, but you guys didn't know each other. I don't think you know each other, but he lived there too. But Uncle Sam, I gotta go.
Right. Me too.
Enjoy the pomfret.
Anybody listen to this, or is it just us?
It's as as the guy said, nobody but us in here. That's that's Stuart Copeland plays drums on it. What was his band? The Police. Nobody but us in here. Nobody but us. That's a line from Miss Rodenko. Yeah. Okay. But I love you, sir. Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate this. All the people who are, who watched, all 8 of you, thank you for doing this. Because usually this is me, with Bengali musicians from my generation, and we just kind of talk about how, somebody stole somebody else's cigarettes and, somebody else farted in a rickshaw. So
you should do a book about it, or a Netflix series. Why don't you do that? Somebody should, right? Haha. Okay. All right. You don't have to answer. Okay. All right.
Tell Susheela I said hi. Regards to her mother, and I'll talk to you very soon. And thank you again for doing this.
She knows who you are. When I say Arafat Kazi, he goes, "Oh, Arafat Kazi."
I'm always terrified to talk to her. She's just
so terrifying.
She's she's just such an amazing, and I mean, she's just such an amazing talent, and it's not to denigrate you, but you're like my buddy, but
I'm an accompanist. She's a singer,
but she just she makes these musical choices that even when she's singing, she'll like hit a note and then go from that to something else, and it's something that is alien enough to me, and that it seems divine. And I'm just so intimidated because I'm just like, why the fuck am I talking to this person? I should only be praying to her.
And when you talk to me, none of this awestruck.
No.
I see.
Sorry about that.
I know. God damn it. Story of my
She's
life.
also easier on the eyes than you.
Especially now. I know. I God knows what you've been looking at. I'm sorry. Because I keep leaning in to kind of. Because I broke my glasses just before we did this. I dropped them on the ground here.
Oy.
They broke. I had to rubber band. Look. See that? What they call it? Jugad. That's not the Indian word for it. You're improvising to kind of keep things going. And
I don't think that word exists in Bengali.
Word Jugad.
I'll check that out. But thank you again. And we are ending on an amazing note. Fucking Biden, no more Trump. Let's pretend this is the Band-Aid over the hemorrhage that is America. So thank you for doing this, and
thank you for having me. I hope it was lucid and.
No, this was for me, and I really enjoyed it. So I'll talk to you very soon. Wine comes in at the mouth.
It's morning in America. It's evening in India. Okay. Bye.
And love comes in the eye. Have a great rest of your night, sir.
Okay.